All right, day one of the 40-day challenge, reading through the Bible. This started in Genesis 1 and ended in Genesis 25, which was essentially the story of creation all the way up through the death of Abraham. And the part that I want to talk about from this actually comes from, and I don't know what chapter this is because I don't have verse numbers and chapter numbers in this Bible, but it's around chapter 21, 22. I lied, I technically. So this is another cool feature of this Bible. It has the chapter and verse range of kind of what's on that page, so you know kind of roughly, approximately where you're at. So this is in Genesis 21, 22, but it's the story of when Abram takes Isaac to the mountain to sacrifice him, and they go up, they build the altar, they put the wood on and everything. Abraham lashes down Isaac to the altar, and he goes to sacrifice him, and the angel of the Lord says, "Stop." Right? So he's about to sacrifice him, and then it says, "But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, 'Abraham, Abraham.' 'Here I am,' he replied. 'Do not lay a hand on the boy,' he said. 'Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son.' Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the place 'The Lord will provide.' And to this day it is said, 'On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided.'" And the thing that stuck out to me about this is that so many of us want the Lord to provide without going to the mountain of the Lord and being prepared to sacrifice the thing that we hold the most dear, right? And it amazed me that it's like, okay, God is testing Abraham's faith, and he says, take your son, go and sacrifice him. And he knows all along that he's going to provide the ram, right? Like, God knows that he's going to provide the sacrifice. He's not actually going to have Abraham go through with killing his son. And yet he waits until the very last second before he provides. In order, and it says later on, he did this in order to test Abraham's faith. But so many of us, we hear God say something, and we believe that God's going to provide. So we hear him say this thing that's going to cost us very dearly, right? God says, go to the mountain and sacrifice this thing. And we know it's going to sacrifice the thing that we hold the most dear. And we're like, I don't think God would do that. Like, that doesn't really seem in line with God's character to ask me to kill my son. I think he's going to do something different, right? And even Abraham believed this, where, he says, the boy and I will go to the mountain and sacrifice, and then we will come back, right? So it's like, we already know Abraham is like us. He sees this and he hears this and he's like, this doesn't really seem like the whole story. God's going to do something inside of this deal. And yet he continues to obey, looking for God to do something and looking for God to provide, but not waiting on God's provision by disobeying what God said, right? And so many of us, we want to see God's provision without actually obeying to the point of it really testing our obedience, right? And yeah, it just stuck out to me, so much of that. And that's what I wrote in the margin here. I said, we want provision without traveling to the mountain and building the altar. We don't want to do the things that God says to do in order to test and prove and affirm our faith, but we want God to provide what he says he's going to provide. But I love that name. It says, Abraham called the place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. Not just like the Lord will provide it, but on the mountain of the Lord. So if you want God to provide, you have to obey and travel to the mountain, and you have to obey and build the altar, and you have to obey and prepare to sacrifice your son. And then after all that obedience, the Lord provides, right? We want provision without the obedience. And that it stuck out to me so much. I'm like, man, how many times in life do we do that? We want provision without the prerequisite obedience. And yeah, so other than that, I don't think I had anything that massively stuck out in this one, but it was really good. I had just recently read Genesis before this, because I've been reading the NET Full Notes Bible. That's what I've been reading through, putting a pause on that to go through this study. But yeah, Genesis 21, 22, and don't expect provision without obedience. You have to obey if you want to be able to reasonably expect the provision of the Lord. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. There you go. That's all I got. See you in the next one.